So, I need to tell you guys about this insane thing that happened to me when I was in elementary school. It's one of those memories that you just brush off as a kid, but when you grow up and actually process it, you realize you were literally inches away from dying. It was the middle of summer break. My parents were working on this massive, half-abandoned apartment complex that was getting renovated. Since they couldn't afford a sitter, they just brought me along and left me in this dusty, empty ground floor unit. My dad handed me his old brick phone to play Snake and just told me not to wander off. It was painfully boring. Just me, the heat, and the sound of construction echoing outside. Around noon, I heard this weird commotion outside my door. I peeked out, expecting to see some construction workers. Instead, standing right there in the hallway was this massive guy. Like NBA height. But the weirdest part? He was wearing a crisp, pitch-black suit with a bright red tie and shiny leather shoes. Bro, it was like 100 degrees outside. Nobody wears a suit to a dusty construction site. His face was flushed, like beet red, and he reeked of cheap alcohol. But it was his face that actually froze me. He was smiling, but it was way too wide, like stretching his face unnatural. He was showing all his teeth, staring down at me without blinking once. Just dead, unblinking eyes. Suddenly, I heard my dad yell from down the hall, "Hey, get back inside!" I thought my dad was mad at me, so I just slammed the door shut and backed away. A little while later, I got bored again and cracked the door open. The suit guy was gone. But sitting on the concrete stairs was a little girl. She looked around my age, wearing this vintage, bright red dress. She was super pale, like zero color in her skin, and her face was totally blank. Just pure NPC energy. She looked at me and said, deadpan, "My dad is picking me up later. You want to go play on the roof?" I was a bored kid with zero survival instincts, so I was like, bet. I followed her all the way up to the top floor. The higher we went, the quieter it got. The top floor was completely unfinished. No walls, no safety rails, just exposed concrete and a sheer drop to the ground below. She walked right up to the ledge, picked up a piece of rubble, and dropped it. She turned to me and said, "Your turn." I walked up to the edge, looking down at the dizzying drop. Suddenly, the girl flinched. It looked like an invisible hand just violently yanked her backward. She hit the concrete hard. I completely panicked and started crying. She just sat up slowly, completely unfazed, no emotion, and said, "Don't cry. I'll take you to watch TV." I was too freaked out to say no, so I followed her down one flight of stairs into this dark, rotting apartment unit. I walked in, and the vibe was instantly suffocating. It felt heavy. Inside the room, there were like 5 or 6 other kids sitting on the bare concrete floor. Nobody was talking. Nobody even looked at me. They were all just dead silent, staring straight ahead at this old, boxy CRT TV sitting on the ground. I looked at the screen. It was playing this super distorted, weird cartoon of a panda eating candy. But the colors were glitching, and the animation looked terrifyingly wrong. The silence in that room was so loud, it made my ears ring. I suddenly felt this overwhelming wave of pure panic. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. Right as I took a step back, I heard it. My dad's voice. He was screaming my name from outside, sounding absolutely terrified. "What are you doing?" That scream snapped me out of whatever trance I was in. I turned and bolted out of that room, running down the stairs as fast as my legs could carry me until I practically crashed into my dad. He grabbed me, shaking me, looking absolutely furious and terrified at the same time. Fast forward a few years. I was in middle school, and my dad and I were just hanging out, talking about that summer. I laughed and brought it up. I said, "Hey, remember that weird guy in the black suit? And those creepy kids watching that glitchy TV in the empty apartment?" My dad stopped what he was doing. All the color drained from his face. He looked at me and asked me 3 questions I will never forget. He said, 1. It was the middle of a heat wave. Who the hell would be wearing a full suit? 2. That site was strictly off limits to families. There wasn't a single other kid on that entire property. And 3, that building hadn't been wired yet. There was absolutely no electricity. I just stared at him, my stomach dropping. Then he leaned in, his voice shaking, and said, I never saw a man in a suit. I never saw a little girl in a red dress. When I screamed your name that day, it's because I looked up and saw you standing entirely alone, 1 inch away from the edge of the roof, leaning forward to step off. This happened during my sophomore year of high school. I went to this super strict boarding school where they had a zero-tolerance policy for phones. Every Monday morning, you had to hand your phone over to your homeroom teacher, and you wouldn't see it again until the weekend. If you were staying on campus for the weekend, like I was, you could usually get your phone back on Saturday night after the optional evening study hall. It was a Saturday. Classes and study hall were completely over, and it was getting pretty late. My homeroom teacher actually lived on campus, right inside the girls' dormitory building. Since I'm a guy, I obviously couldn't just walk in there, so I had to stand outside the heavy glass doors of the girls' dorm in the freezing cold, waiting for a female classmate of mine to run up and grab some stuff from our teacher. After a few minutes, she finally came back out. She handed me some papers, and right as we were about to split up, I realized something. I told her, "Hey, we both left our phones sitting on the desk in the academic building's office." She groaned, but agreed to walk back with me to grab them. It was almost 9 p.m. by this point. The campus was dead. Pitch black, except for a few flickering streetlights. The academic building was pretty far from the dorms, sitting all by itself across this massive, empty courtyard. As we got closer to the building, we both just stopped walking. The academic building is 5 stories tall, with about 5 classrooms on each floor. Normally, at 9 p.m. on a Saturday, only the stairwell lights are kept on. But tonight, every single light in the entire building was blazing. Every classroom, every hallway, from the ground floor all the way up to the roof. It was glowing so brightly in the dark campus that it actually hurt your eyes to look at it. It made absolutely 0 sense. We didn't want to get in trouble, so we quietly slipped through the front doors. The silence inside was suffocating. We didn't hear a single footstep, no voices, nothing. We walked all the way up to the 5th floor, found the office door completely unlocked, grabbed our phones, and immediately started heading back. Since we were terrified of getting caught by a rogue security guard, we decided we would turn off the hallway lights on each floor as we went down, just to cover our tracks. We hit the switch on the 5th floor. Click, pitch black. We walked down the stairs to the 4th floor, hit the switch. Click, pitch black. Then, we descended the stairs to the 3rd floor. Now, the layout of this building is important. When you stand on the stair landing, you are looking directly down the long hallway. And every single classroom has these heavy, red fire doors with a small rectangular glass window right in the middle. As we stepped onto the 3rd floor landing, the corridor lights were still glaringly bright. I looked straight down the hall at the classroom door directly facing the stairs, and my heart stopped. Pressed completely flat against the small glass window of that red door was a face. It was a woman. Her skin was sickly pale, and her messy, disheveled hair was plastered against the glass. She wasn't moving. She was just staring dead straight at us with this hollow, unblinking look. My classmate let out this sharp, strangled gasp. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my jacket so hard I thought she was going to rip it. We were completely paralyzed. We couldn't scream. We couldn't even breathe. The stairwell to go down was right next to that hallway. To get past, we had to walk right into her line of sight. My classmate just squeezed her eyes shut and buried her face in my shoulder. I didn't dare look again. I stared at my own shoes, completely tense, and we just blindly shuffled down the remaining steps as fast as we could without tripping. The second we hit the first floor, we sprinted. We didn't even bother turning off the lights. We crashed through the north exit doors and bolted into the freezing night air, running hard to the right, straight toward the dorms. We were about halfway across the courtyard when I made the worst mistake of my life. I looked back. I glanced up at the side of the academic building, and there, perfectly framed in the third-floor side window, looking down at the courtyard, was that exact same blurry face, just watching us run. We made it back to the dorms, but my classmate, she couldn't handle it. Over the next 2 days, she completely fell apart. She stopped sleeping, stopped talking. She was so traumatized that her parents came and pulled her out of school entirely that same week. I never told anyone else what we saw that night. But even now, years later, I absolutely refuse to look at dark windows at night. I've never told anyone this story outside of my immediate family. Mostly because, well, I know exactly how insane it sounds. I grew up in a super rural town in northern Michigan. Winters there are absolutely brutal. By January, the local river would completely freeze over. The water level would drop significantly, exposing this wide, muddy riverbed and a long, cracked concrete dam right down the middle. It was the middle of winter, probably around 15 degrees outside. I was a middle schooler with major cabin fever, so I decided to take a walk by the river just to get out of the house. The sky was that dull, grayish-white color that makes everything look dead, and the wind was howling. The riverbank was completely deserted. I was just walking along the edge, listening to the crunch of my boots on the frozen mud, looking down at the concrete dam. About half a mile down the trail, I noticed something black resting out in the middle of the dam. At first, my brain did what anyone's brain would do. I rationalized it. I told myself it was just a massive black trash bag or a tarp that someone had dumped. The wind was whipping around pretty hard, so seeing garbage blow out onto the ice wasn't exactly a paranormal event. But as I kept walking, I realized it wasn't just sitting there. It was moving. It was creeping forward, inching along the concrete. I stopped walking. I just stood there on the bank, watching it. And that's when my stomach dropped. Because the physics of what I was looking at made absolutely zero sense. The wind was blowing incredibly hard against my face, blowing away from the object. But this black mass was moving steadily forward, cutting straight through the wind. And the movement was too fluid. It wasn't tumbling. It was gliding. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly, the mass stopped moving entirely. And then, it slowly turned toward me. It wasn't a trash bag. It was a person. An old woman, completely swallowed up in this oversized, heavy black cloak. But her face, it wasn't normal. Her skin was paper white. I mean, completely devoid of any color, like chalk. And where her eyes should have been, there was just blackness, like two empty, sunken voids. She was at least 50 yards away, but I could feel her staring right through my chest. Then, she did something that still makes me sick to my stomach. She didn't turn her body normally to face me. She flipped over, smoothly, like a flat, two-dimensional piece of paper just flipping in the wind. And then, she started moving toward me. Fast. but her legs weren't moving. She was just rigidly sliding across the concrete and the ice, gliding effortlessly toward my side of the riverbank, picking up speed. Pure, primal panic took over. I didn't even scream. My throat just completely locked up. I spun around and ran faster than I have ever run in my entire life. I didn't look back once. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the wind. I bolted all the way home, locked the door, and just collapsed in the hallway. I didn't tell my parents. My brain couldn't even process what I had just seen, so I just buried it. For years, I had nightmares about that paper white face. But eventually, as I got older, I convinced myself it was just a hallucination, a weird trick of the winter light on a garbage bag. Fast forward to my junior year of high school. My family and I were taking a walk along that exact same river trail. We were just talking, laughing, a completely normal, mundane Sunday. I randomly glanced out toward the center of the drained river, looking at the concrete dam, and my blood went entirely cold. She was there, standing in the exact same spot, wearing the exact same black cloak. I grabbed my dad's arm and pointed, my voice shaking. "Do you see her? Right there!" My dad squinted, looked exactly where I was pointing, and looked back at me, completely confused. He said there was absolutely nothing there, just empty concrete. But she was right there, staring directly at me. I basically forced my family to turn around and leave immediately, making up some excuse about feeling violently ill. I thought that was the end of it, just another visual glitch. But that night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sound. Scratch, scratch. It was a faint, methodical scratching sound coming from my bedroom window. Now, my bedroom was on the second floor of the house. There was no balcony. There were no trees near my window. There was absolutely no rational reason for anything to be scratching at the glass. I lay there in the dark, frozen, covered in a cold sweat. I told myself it was just a bird, just the wind. I slowly forced myself out of bed and crept over to the window. I grabbed the edge of the curtain and pulled it back. Pressed completely flat against the outside of the second-story glass was her face. The chalk-white skin, the black void eyes, just staring in at me from the darkness, smiling this impossible, unnaturally wide smile. I screamed so loud my throat bled. I backed into the corner of my room and didn't stop screaming until my dad literally broke my bedroom door off its hinges. By the time he flipped the lights on and ran to the window, it was completely empty. We moved out of that state less than a year later. I'm in college now, thousands of miles away. But sometimes, when the weather gets really cold and the wind starts howling at night, I absolutely refuse to look at the windows. Because I know, if I look, she might be looking back.